We bring you this special radio television broadcast in order to give you the very latest information on an amazing phenomenon.
From the files of Schlock and Awe, welcome to Natural Selection, the home of the DTV Creature Feature. Here are your hosts, Matty Budrewicz and Dave Wain.
Don't you dare touch me! Stand back! No! No!
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Natural Selection, the ultimate DTV Creature Feature podcast. My name is Dave Wain, and to my right I have my good friend Matty Budrewicz.
Hello.
Thank you all for your correspondence and likes and shares and follows in the last few weeks. It's been amazing. And don't forget to keep on sharing our podcast and telling everyone if they fancy something creepy and crawly that we're the people to come and see.
Not in the way that you've hinted at it, that you've made us sound quite seedy. But it's been said. It's been said.
So today, what do we got? We've got a double header, and we've got some spider's legs.
Yeah, spider's legs.
You should really see to. And then we've got some dog on dog action.
Dog, yeah,
solo dog
we had
action.
We're doing it doggy style.
Doggy style.
There we go. We might as well get all the innuendos out
Why
there.
not? You've done that,
right now.
So how are we going to approach this? So we got Arachnid coming up first, which is Jack Sholder's film, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So why have we chosen these two films?
Well, Arachnid from 2001, directed by Jack Sholder, and ROTTWEILER from 2004, directed by Brian Yuzna.
Yeah.
Okay. Both of these films are productions of Brian Yuzna's old company, The Fantastic Factory. Okay, and the reasoning behind this is while 2004 sort of is maybe a little beyond our remit, because we're really trying to focus on the ones between 99 and 2002 times. ROTTWEILER and Arachnid, everything we've looked at so far has been released by Trimark. Yeah. Okay, well, at least stateside, anyway. So, to sort of recap what we said last episode, Trimark was formed in 1984 by Mark Amin as Vidmark. And the company was originally a video distributor, but they moved to production in 1988 when they stumped up a bit of cash for Demon Warp with George Kennedy. Demon Warp proved to be very, very profitable thanks to video sales, international and cable TV sales. And Amin ended up rechristening Vidmark Trimark in 1989 with an eye to moving in theatrical distribution and movie production of his own. So the first film that Trimark pick up is Warlock, the wonderful Richard E. Grant, Julian Sands movie. Great stuff. And so they pick that up for theatrical distribution in 89. And Trimark quickly go on to become one of the great companies of 90s B cinema, particularly horror. So you got the Warlock sequels, you got the Leprechaun franchise, and Return of the Living Dead 3 by Brian Yuzna.
Indeed.
Okay, so Brian Yuzna, if you're listening to this, you'll be well versed in the work of Yuzna, I'm sure. This is a guy who needs no introduction. He's the producer of Re-Animator, the director of Society, produced From Beyond, produced Dolls, just a wealth of great, very distinguished, kind of schlocky, kinky, weird horror movies, okay? Sort of like, I always liken Yuzna to be, a sort of cross between David Cronenberg and Frank Henenlotter.
Oh, yeah.
The midpoint between the two. Now, Yuzna, he had a relationship with Trimark and Mark Amin. They'd dealt with each other on a couple of occasions, long before Arachnid and ROTTWEILER. Yuzna, supposedly, he'd helped prep the video release for Warlock back in 1991.
Right.
And of course, like we mentioned, he made Return of the Living Dead 3 for them, and The Dentist and The Dentist 2.
Yeah.
Which were both incredibly successful when they played on HBO and have become real cult favourites based upon their DVD releases and video releases from Trimark. Now, The Dentist 2 was made in 1998.
Yeah.
Okay? And at the 1998 Sitges festival in Spain, Yuzna was there with The Dentist 2. It was competing in the best film category, which, strange enough, Vincenzo Natali's Cube ended up winning. And while at Sitges, Julio Fernandez, the president of Spanish company Filmax, invited Yuzna to work in Spain with him to make a slate of horror movies.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Yuzna, he'd already flirted with the idea of forming like a Hammer-type brand before. A couple of years previously, he touted the 7 sins of horror around Miramax / Dimension, which, strangely enough, the film Idle Hands was originally designed as one of the 7 deadly sins concepts. It was meant to be based around the sin of sloth. So, Yuzna wanted to set up like a Hammer-type brand, a Hammer-type label. So, him and Fernandez, they formed the Fantastic Factory, okay, which great little company. They ended up producing stuff like Faust, Love of the Damned, Beyond Re-Animator, Dagon, the great Stuart Gordon movie. And the aim of Fantastic Factory was to bring horror talent from all over the world to Spain and to develop local talent, which of course it did. If you look at some of the movies, if you look at Darkness, if you look at Roma Santa, you have Juan Balaguero and Paco Plaza, some of their early stuff. This is before they would explode, or with Wreck. And so all these Fantastic Factory movies, all except Juan Balaguero's Darkness in 2002, which was picked up and butchered by Dimension at the hands of Harvey Weinstein, whose hands have got him in a lot more trouble since. All these Fantastic Factory films, they were distributed stateside via Lionsgate, who, strangely enough, had acquired Trimark in 2000, with Trimark's Mark Amin becoming the majority shareholder. Okay, so these Fantastic Factory movies, they are released by Lionsgate via the pre-existing relationship that Yuzna had with Trimark and Mark Amin. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, all the Fantastic Factory stuff, well, all of it, again, bar Darkness, because it wasn't owned by them, it wound up playing on the Sci-Fi Channel. And one of the Fantastic Factory films became the highest tracking film of 2002 for Sci-Fi. And that, of course, was Arachnid, which was a creature feature.
In the jungle before you know. I can take care of myself. Shit!
Something's not quite right here.
You okay? Yeah, just stuck.
We are here to give medical aid to these people and to learn what's killing them.
In English?
Find out exactly what bit him.
Bit him?
A spider, you think?
Agreed. A spider that large couldn't exist.
So what was it? Grab my boot.
This is interspecies mutation. These creatures seem to be evolving at a lightning speed towards becoming the ultimate predators.
All spiders go to heaven. Didn't I read that in your book?
Oh my. What a magnificent predator.
I hate spiders.
You've been listening to a clip from Arachnid there, Jack Sholder's 2001 creature feature from the Fantastic Factory. Jack Sholder, sort of a bit of a funny guy. Not a great fan of what he does. Well, I am a great fan, but he's not really. It's a bit weird, isn't it?
Yeah, he for a guy who's probably best remembered as the director of A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and The Hidden.
Yeah.
He is quite famously not a horror fan. And I think in a film like Arachnid, which was very, very, very much a gun-for-hire job, Sholder's sort of disinterest, shall we say, in the material really comes across.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. I mean, he said afterwards, didn't he? He said, I did it for the money. It was a stupid script, but I got to live in Barcelona for 6 months, and it paid me well. Everything was good except I had to go to work every day and shoot a dumb script. Haven't seen it since. I basically tell people to avoid that one.
Yeah, pretty damning, and the whole thing with Arachnid is, it just drips with that sort of contempt for the material.
Yeah. But, this is a guy that made Runaway Car, 4 years prior with Judge Reinhold, which, I quite like. But, it's in... I know we're not the biggest fans of Arachnid, but, compared to Runaway Car and I think it's a Dodgy Omen film as well in the mid-90s, it's a lot better than some of the stuff he has done.
The sad thing is, Arachnid is probably one of the ones which, along with, there's A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, which has had a massive, massive reappraisal over the last few years, and rightly so. It's a very, very good sequel, a very bold sequel. Its mark on on queer horror cannot be understated. Even though Sholder himself is pretty adamant that it wasn't meant to be that gay, but. And Alone in the Dark, which is his debut film, is very, very good. Probably one of the most interesting variations of the slasher formula that come out of the 80s. The Hidden, I think, is just fantastic. A great piece of action-tinged horror. But Arachnid, like Wishmaster 2, which he directed just beforehand in 99, I'm a big fan of Wishmaster 2. But again, it's got Arachnid's problem of you can just tell he's not that interested and he is going through the motions, which is a shame, really, as Sholder was effectively headhunted by Julio Fernandez from the Fantastic Factory. Initially, Arachnid was developed with an eye for first Robert Kurtzman, the K from K&B Effects, who of course had directed the original Wishmaster. He was first approached by Yuzna. Strangely enough, Toby Hooper was talked to by Yuzna with who wanted him to direct it, which obviously fits very neatly in with the fact that Toby Hooper was originally going to direct Spiders for New Image as well. So Hooper seemed to be in some sort of strange eight-legged vogue at this point. But Yuzna wanted him. But when that didn't work out, Julio Fernandez went to bat for Jack Sholder, because obviously The Hidden was a massive, massive success in Spain, and it was still regularly being shown on Spanish television.
So I mean, obviously, Sholder's lack of interest in this film is kind of your bugbear, no pun intended. But I mean, you've got a script there that was written prior to everything, wasn't it? I mean, using the kind of hints that the script was done. It was brought in by Sherry Bryant, was it? Who, of course, was she co-producer on The Dentist? Yeah, she was associate producer on The Dentist, and obviously she was another connection in the point with Trimark, then Stroke Lionsgate. A Mark Amin contact. Yeah, so you got a script by Mark Sevi, who of course is sort of a key member of the 90s fraternity of... a mainstay of Cinetel. Yeah, I mean, he was so prolific, wasn't he? He did 13 films in 5 years. A lot of them sequels. I know we refer to Michael D. Weiss as that sequel guy. But in some respects, Mark Sevi should also bear that name. Because you've got, Relentless 2, which I know you love deeply. Class of 99 2, Ghoulies 4, Excessive Force 2, Force on Force, which I saw the other night. It was on TCM. It's just it's so good. So yeah, Mark's heavy script was done. So I think Yuzna pretty much tinkered with it a little bit, didn't he, to sort of mould it into what he wanted.
Added a couple more creatures, a couple more. It was very much the film Arachnid, as it suggests by its title. It's about a giant frigging spider.
Yeah.
Yuzna, he had previous creature feature form. He'd done Ticks as executive producer, which is probably one of the best direct-to-video movies of the 90s, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. How can you not love a movie in which Carlton Banks plays a tough inner-city street kid, But, yeah, so Yuzna had made Ticks, and that was very, very insect action heavy, as was his sequel, Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, Initiation, which also contained some amazing bug effects by Screaming Mad George.
Yeah.
So, Yuzna, as he was when he was developing the movies for the Fantastic Factory, the initial slate, stuff like Faust, stuff like Dagon, Beyond Re-Animator. His idea behind it was, with Faust, you had a comic book movie.
Yeah.
With Dagon, you had a Lovecraft, a very classic sort of movie.
That's right.
With Beyond Re-Animator, you had a sequel to a well-known property. And obviously, to tick another box in sort of, in the sort of genre gamut, to really represent what the genre was about, what Fantastic Factory could do, he wanted to do a creature feature. And so Mark Sevi, who a very, very capable set of hands, his script was pretty much written. It just needed a bit of tweaking to it.
So, we start off here with a bit of a prologue about a guy, a pilot, wasn't it? Who eventually turns out to be the lead actress's brother, that gets downed, and then we're in Guam all of a sudden, which is a pretty crazy place. Filmed around Barcelona, wasn't it? But wasn't some of the jungle sequences done in Mexico?
Yes. Yeah.
I hate the beginning of the film, in all honesty. The way that we suddenly get these 4 key characters. You've got sort of the lead guy, which is a character called Lev Valentine, played by Chris Potter. You've got Lauren Mercer, who is a Cornish-born actress, well known for The Descent 1 and 2, isn't she? Played by Alex Reed. And then you got the doctor. You got Jose Sancho. You got Susanna, who makes a great dehydrated stew, apparently,
and can cure your unsightly blackheads.
She can. You got her. So you got these 4 key characters all turn up within like 60 seconds of each other, and then decide, hey, let's go, let's organise this expedition. And it's done in seconds.
Yeah, and purely in a what's happened in the interim is that a bunch of sort of indigenous people have been flown over to this hospital with these strange insect bites, which, as is revealed in the prologue, there's a giant spider behind, a giant, not just a giant spider, but a giant extraterrestrial spider. Because it turns out this aircraft crashes into it, and this into a giant spaceship, and this spaceship spills its contents all over the rainforest, and it's carrying all sorts of crazy biological creatures from the galaxy over, which is a really, really cool concept, but one that is just completely squandered with the flattest scripting and directing imaginable.
True. Then we got our 5th member of the congregation. It's Dr. Henry Capri, played by Ravel Izyanov, who of course we know from 2 episodes ago. Well, last episode, wasn't it? It was 2 episodes ago. Octopus 2. Yeah.
No, First Octopus. Episode 1. Episode 1. Ravel Izyanov from John Ayres' Octopus.
Indeed.
He's one of these sort of rent-a-Euro baddies who sort of pop up in these kind of things, but here completely playing against type as an eccentric spider specialist.
He's playing Jeffrey Combs, essentially, isn't he? He is. He even has the look of Jeffrey Combs in this film, and sort of makes you think, was Jeffrey ever sort of intended for that role? It seems like a role that really fits him.
I'd also really like to add that the Henry Capri character is the author of a book called Arachnid Fun Facts, which is a title that is quite ill-fitting, I think, of someone who's supposed to be an academic. And it also makes for the least convincing prop book ever. I mean, when you see this thing on camera, it looks like it was made on paint. The font's like a primary school bulletin board display, you know?
Yeah, it's not great. But you see, to me, once it gets to the jungle, then the film completely changes. And you can see the influences from the 50s, and it does have a bit of a better vibe about it. I just think it really lifts during that period. Do you just think it's flat the whole way through? Or?
I do. To me, regardless of how many little creatures sort of pop up in the interim, until you get to the big spider reveal, like in the last half hour, the film just like... And that's not to say the spider reveal's particularly well done either, because we'll get to that bit, because I think that's it's not a very well assembled sequence of stuff, and you know, everything that happens, it's just, you know, the big problem is Sholder's complete lack of investment in the material. You know, you can tell he just doesn't give a shit. And, you know, that translates to the screen. The film just plods along, and ultimately I am, as much as I want to like what's going on, because there is some cool stuff there. There's so, you know, the characters have a few little jibes and barbs between them and stuff. The effects work, which we'll get on to, is really good for practical stuff. But if Sholder, you know, he's just locking the camera off, it's point and shooting, it's like if he doesn't care, why should we?
Yeah, but I thought in some respects, you know, that flat element of it almost harnessed that 50s style of just a rush released movie. You know, some, you know, in saying that, it kind of blended the sort of oversized, genetically mutated hysteria of the 1950s with the icky, gooey FX wizardry of the 90s/noughties. So in some respects, I don't think Sholder's flatness really diminished what it was, because if they wanted to make a 50s monster movie, then to be honest, well, aside from a couple of, you know, key monster movies from the 50s, the majority were pretty flat and pretty lifeless and pretty much paint by numbers, you know, creature features. So yeah, you expect more, but for what it, you know, comes in with, I was pretty satisfied with it.
I think I judge it based upon the quality of Yuzna's other stuff. Even as a producer, there's always a distinctly Yuzna thumbprint to his stuff. You know, like Ticks is just rapid fire. There's something constantly happening, and there's a sense that Sevi's script and that Yuzna as a producer is aiming for a sort of like rapid fire approach to it to sort of make things happen, but it just never. It just doesn't leave the gate, you know, and there is, like I said, there's a little bit of life injected into the film during when the giant spider's revealed, this whole bit in a military bunker where it's attacking everyone. But even then, it's so just blandly shot and so like cobbled together that the practical effects, which are pretty much the last hurrah for the great Steve Johnson. You know, at least for a while. You know, they are just completely. They're very cool, and you know, and there's something that even Johnson himself has expressed pride in, but they and the performances, which are very game, are just really undone by like the lazy attitude of Sholder.
Yeah, I mean, even I suppose the practical effects. I mean, Steve Johnson does do an amazing job, but even some of them don't quite work. I mean, there's a great scene, sort of a nightmarish transformation sequence. Which is great, but it's not quite there. It's almost like a dummy run for it's almost like a... Yeah. You know, it doesn't feel like a finished transformation sequence. It feels like...
Yeah, could have done with a bit more tweaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I think for, you know, knowing a little bit about Steve Johnson, I think he was heading... This was just on the precipice of his career burnout, just shortly before, you know, he could sense that CGI effects were coming in, and the practical guys like him, who previously had these, like, rock star type lives across the pages of Fangoria and stuff, they were getting pushed out. He was losing bids on projects and stuff because the CGI guys could do it cheaper. And I think that maybe he wasn't on set. He's quite candid in interviews in the on the old Arrow DVD of Arachnid. He's very candid, saying that he was more interested getting drunk and going dancing around Beaver. He was just letting his FX guys sort of like take the reins. But he designed all the effects. And there's a bit of creativity in there and stuff like that. And compared to other films of a similar budget, there's a certainly a bit better quality there with Johnson's stuff. There's a more of a professional rather than a sort of like, we can just disguise it with clever cutting. That giant spider effect. You can see that is a giant spider that they've actually made. And it looks fantastic. It's up there with we talked last episode about King Cobra. And the Kyoto brothers' effect in King Cobra is Arachnid belongs alongside that as something that does look very, very cool, even if it maybe in its movements isn't quite as polished as it should be. They could have had a bit more practice. Puppeteering it and stuff.
From a technical point of view, Sholder is working with a few people he was familiar with. He's got Anthony C. Ferranti there, who's did makeup on Wishmaster 2 that he's taken over to do this film. The same DP from Wishmaster 2, Carlos Gonzalez. And you've got a good editor in Juan Villata from Dagon. So, you just feel a little bit frustrated, I guess, that, it didn't quite fulfill what the potential it could have been. Because with Sholder, like we said, he's expressed his distaste for horror, particularly the schlocky low budget end that he often works in. He like we've explained, he does it for the money, not for the love, which can be fine. Everyone has to make a living, and I'd be delusional if I didn't say that some of my favourite directors were strictly mercenary. A lot of the stuff Jim Wynorski's done. I love Wynorski, but he is driven by the market. Fred Olen Ray, I love Fred Olen Ray, but he's driven by the market. He's driven where the work goes. Fred Olen Ray famously has he doesn't like erotic thrillers, even though he's made some bloody good ones like Inner Sanctum. So everyone has to make a living, but I've always got the impression with Sholder that he's kind of snooty about it, and has always maybe been a little unhappy that he's never made the more artful pictures that he clearly wants to. This was his last call as well. He went to India 2 years after that, or a year after that, to make Beeper, which was a really bizarre film made for the Indian market, but you had Harvey Keitel in it and Joey Lauren Adams, and that really that did not set my loins alight, so to speak. I didn't fancy that at all. So it's a shame. Maybe in another life he'll come back and make a great Jean Renoir film of.
Well, he's a very, that's the thing. He's a big fan of. Likes to talk about French cinema and stuff, and I'm afraid that's not the hand he's been dealt with. So instead, we get some brilliant movies by him, like The Hidden, like Elm Street 2, like Alone in the Dark. But mostly, we get some films that could have been brilliant, but are sank by his sort of. I don't want to say contempt that makes him. I don't think he's a bitter guy. I think he's just a bit frustrated at what could have been. And that, in the case of Arachnid, it's never been more apparent.
You're listening to Natural Selection, the home of the DTV Creature Feature.
I'm scared.
Of what?
The monster.
The game's just beginning.
I guess today just wasn't your lucky day.
You want me? Come get me!
What is it?
It's a ROTTWEILER.
can't keep up.
Alright, a clip from Rottweiler there by Brian Yuzna, his directorial follow-up to Beyond Re-Animator, and the 7th of 9 films that he would produce for the Fantastic Factory. And I'm going to put it out there right now, probably one of my favourites. Yeah.
Outrageous.
Contentious or what?
It is contentious because, normally when you do a bit of research on these films and you look at people's opinions and you look at reviews from either when it came out or maybe people have looked back at it in recent times, you tend to get a broad spectrum of opinions. But I think with Rottweiler, I mean, it's one end only.
Universally lambasted.
It is, universally. I mean, people really despise this film.
Yeah.
I don't know what they were looking for.
No, I mean, I think I'm going off a kind of hazy memory here. And I don't want to get too autobiographical, but I can remember, I know I want to hear the sort of like nostalgia wanking going on. But, I can remember Rottweiler being announced, and it was announced more... the film that was announced wasn't the film that it became. It was more akin to something like Cujo, if memory serves. It was about a bunch of teens on like a spring break kind of thing getting attacked by a murderous robotic dog. Now the robotic dog thing, that stayed. The Rottweiler, the eponymous Rottweiler is basically the Terminator of dogs. But the eventual film was sort of, in the words of Yuzna, a free adaptation of the novel El Perro by Alberto Vasquez Figueroa. Now, I'm not going to pretend I'm familiar with his work or anything like that. Figueroa wrote Rottweiler's script with input from Miguel Tejeda Flores and CG's festival director Angel Sala and Mike Hostench, who would go on to produce Baskin.
Yeah.
But this sort of free adaptation, apparently, from what I gather, because I think the novel's only available in Spanish, El Perro is a fiercely political novel. Drawing upon the sort of political history of Spain with fascism and things like that.
Yeah, well, the book was published in 1975, which of course was the final year of Franco's rule. So you can almost imagine that Vasquez Figueroa was writing it, 73, 74, and up until that point where that fascist dictatorship ended in Spain, and obviously democracy began to rule. But yeah, he's a massive writer, isn't he? He sold 25 million copies of his books.
Yeah,
most famous film adapted was probably Ashanti with Michael Caine in 1979. So this is a major piece of work.
And also the novel El Perro, it was adapted before in 1977 as El Perro. I believe it was released in England called A Dog Called Vengeance, starring Jason Miller of The Exorcist. Again, I'm not going to express any familiarity with him because I've never seen it, couldn't track a copy down in time for this. But what struck me was the film was actually co-written by a guy called Juan Antonio Porto, who also wrote something called El Basque del Lobo in 1976, which was a film based upon the true events that would inspire Yuzna's previous Fantastic Factory production, Roma Santa, the Werewolf Hunt. So it's strange as that little link there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was a free adaptation that sort of stuck to the core idea of the novel.
Just quick trivia, which I know you're going to get this in like 5 seconds, but I'm going to ask anyway.
Don't put me on the spot.
I'm going to put you on the spot. What links the author of Rottweiler with the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise?
Pass.
Oh,
what is it?
Got you. Yuzna directed
Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, yeah.
Monty Hellman directed Silent Night, Deadly Night 3.
Oh my god.
Monty Hellman directed Iguana,
which was based on a novel by him. Wow, well played, sir.
That's alright.
Well played.
Gotta come in handy sometimes.
That is amazing. As if we were dropping the Iguana bomb in there as well. What a wild movie that is.
Gotta be done. Interrupted your flow. Sorry, go on.
Where were we? Free adaptation. So Rottweiler sticks close to the idea of a prisoner being pursued cross-country by a dog. Yeah. Only instead of in the novel, it's not set in like the Spain of the day. It's set it's set so many years into the future, and it's not a German Shepherd that's chasing him. In Rottweiler, it is obviously a Rottweiler which has robotic enhancements. Okay. What strikes me about the actual film is that it begins, we're introduced to Prisoner 275, a guy called Dante, who was played by William Miller, who's an English guy who's actually a fairly big Spanish TV star, which is kind of crazy. And we're introduced to him in a section called Zone Control, and before this caption comes up saying that it's the year 2018, which obviously Rottweiler was made in 2004, so this is, it's a near future shocker. So 2018, a prison camp, immigration containment zone, southern Spain, and my God, watching Rottweiler today, it is, if you took the southern Spain part out, this is a remarkably prescient bit of future shock. Take away the Spain, immigration camps in the age of Trump, like, this is, the fact is that then we're introduced to this dictator character who's played by Euroshock icon Paul Naschy. And he's this real unpleasant bastard.
Well, that's the funny thing about the film, really, because you think to yourself, well, you're taking Spain and sort of the source out of the novel. You're taking Vasquez Figueroa out the novel to what he intended, and you're relocating it into American location kind of thing. Well, hint at it being more American.
It's an Americanized Spain. That though, I don't think it's anything to do with like the narrative. They make it clear that it's set in Spain, but Fantastic Factory films, they're done primarily for the English market. Yeah, they're not subtitled or out like that.
But you sort of wonder as you go into it. You wonder how much of the tone of the original novel will be diminished, and how much it will be reduced. Will it be completely sort of have its balls cut off and be quite sort of bland and non-political? But it's not. I think, as you say, in 2019,
political
it
movie.
is very.
The Paul Naschy's character, a guy called Coufard. He's a dictator. Hates immigrants.
Yeah.
Rapey. I'm sure you can tell where I'm going with this, right? Yeah. The comparisons to where we are in the world now, particularly with with Trump in the White House, this is it's quite frightening. Yeah. And obviously the central metaphor of the film is that it's a little heavy-handed, but man as beast, and that men are worse to each other than any animal can be, and all that stuff, and it's all about savagery. The stuff about immigration, you've got the to-haves and the to-have-nots and stuff, because... And it seems to present this sort of future shock world, which I read a couple of criticisms about Rottweiler saying that, like, why do people do this when they don't have the budget to show, like, what life's like in the future? But I think it does it very well, but it's just not... It's not hitting you across the face. It's really quite subtle. It's very you can tell that it's like a nightmarish landscape, particularly when the Dante character is pursued into the city and he goes into like the red light district and stuff. But you've got this sort of like a lot of the background vistas when it comes to shooting shots of like the Spanish industry and stuff. It's like a cross between Blade Runner and The Devils. In terms of look, this sort of industrial gothic look to it, and. It's very it feels a lot like it is building a world, but it's just crazy, absolutely crazy, and it's very cleverly done to make you feel like it feels much bigger than it is. It's a very expansive film.
Do you think the flashback sequences were an issue for people? I mean, people like linear storyline, don't they? Especially sort of the harder thinking, knuckle dragging horror crowd, and it does tend to, those flashbacks which start obviously on the boat, Do you think that asks too much of an audience, which maybe doesn't want to think too hard, or maybe doesn't want?
The problem's twofold, I think, in terms of structure. Okay, the first problem is that Dante and his girlfriend, who the reason he's being chased by this Rottweiler after he breaks out of a prison chain gang, is he's trying to track down his lost love.
Yeah,
and his lost love's called Ula Loom, in an explicit nod to Edgar Allan Poe, which is cool because there is a few little gothic touches to the movie, particularly in the scenes where we get Yuzna, pardon the pun, reanimating the canine. But the problem is that Dante and Ula, they're not particularly nice people. They're spoiled, bratty, rich kids. They're playing a game that they call Infiltration, which is, it reminded me a lot of the... Have you ever read the Chuck Palahniuk novel, Haunted?
Oh, yeah.
There's like a little vignette in that where one of the people, she's this rich housewife and she dresses up and pretends to be a homeless person to get her kicks. And that's the world that Yuzna's trying to put across. That everyone has become that jaded that this sort of savagery is the norm. That's why someone like Paul Nashi's Kufad is allowed to sort of exist and cast rule over Spain because, he's a nasty bastard and it's survival of the meanest and fittest. Okay? Now, Ula and Dante aren't particularly likeable characters. No. And the flashback structure, now I like it because at the end we go full circle. We realise that Dante's quest has all been for naught because he was actually there on the night that Ula was killed.
That's right. And
so she's not alive, she's dead, and Dante had a hand in it. Yeah. And the whole thing has effectively been a game by Kufad. But I like it in a sense that, to my mind, when I watch Rottweiler, it reminds me of like an Alejandro Jodorowsky film. Yeah. There's a real sort of acid western sort of flavour to it. It'd be a great double feature with El Topo.
There's a big western theme running right the way through the middle of it, isn't it? I mean, it's easy to spot. But yeah, you're right. That would be a trippy double bill.
Oh, it'd be insane. Rottweiler, it's a film concerned with metaphor. It's not entirely successful. It is very, like I said, heavy-handed, at times. And the script isn't really well thought out enough. But, it's got all the hallmarks of like the acid western subgenre. It's got the excessiveness, the violence, the bloodletting. This sort of... the ideas of like outsiderism, the idea of like a quest to find something as well as yourself, Yuzna, he's an ex-hippie man, he's I'm sure he's very well versed in counterculture.
Right. So, what do you think about the dog itself?
Love it.
Yeah?
Absolutely love it, yeah. I think...
Vince Guastani, wasn't it? And Greg Ramundos. I mean, we're showing it in all stages of sort of reanimation and decay and dead and alive. Do you not think it's a victim of sort of CGI 2004?
It's something I constantly come back to, but bad CGI can be just as charming as bad practical works. Yeah. I look at Rottweiler and I don't think the CGI... It's not great by modern standards, but it's just it's very serviceable. You've got the enhancements to the jaws. It's got these wonderful metallic jaws. It's got the glowing eyes and stuff. The actual when its flesh gets melted off and it's sort of like it becomes like the endoskeleton look, the Terminator endoskeleton. Yeah. That's sort of it's kind of ropey, but it's not. It doesn't distract. There's a lot worse CGI out there. It does its job.
With Rottweiler, I think people it would help people to know more about it before they go into it. I mean, maybe unless you've had sort of a cursory glance at what the Alberto Vázquez Figueroa novel is about, unless you're aware that there's a little bit of not a little bit, but a sizable political aspect to it, unless you're aware of maybe the Western element. I think you're expecting Cujo 2, as you say. Or you're expecting Man's Best Friend 2, or something like that.
Yeah.
And you're not. You're going into something completely different. And I think I would have enjoyed it a lot less had I gone into it blind. And I think that may have been what a lot of people did when it initially came out in 2004, both from a critical and sort of a fan perspective as well. I think they sort of see Brian Yuzna's name above the title, and they expect a Brian Yuzna film. I don't think it. Which could you tell it was a Brian Yuzna film if you didn't know who directed
absolutely.
it? Really?
Absolutely. I think obviously the visual language. There's a lot of, like, Yuzna has a very distinct visual style. It's very in your face. It's very immersive. He's very concerned with pushing into characters, really letting you see their anguish, letting you see what they're going through.
Well, their ass.
Yeah. I also think as well that Yuzna he can be a political filmmaker. I mean, God, let's look at Society, which this would make a great companion piece to. But also, he is concerned with the human condition, particularly how the body can sort of go through a lot of damage and keep going, which is something that happens within Rottweiler. Yeah. And also, Rottweiler delivers on the more exploitative and schlocky aspects that you come to expect from a Yuzna film. There's this great sequence where at the farmhouse, where Dante is he's raped at knife point by the farmer's wife.
Yeah, Jesus.
And not only is that a wonderful bit of schlock along the lines of Yuzna's typical fruitiness. It's in the tradition of the sex and violence mashups within Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, within Return of the Living Dead 3, and The Dentist. Where sex often or the naked body often leads to some sort of ghastly, gory payoff. Yeah. It also outlines the thematic crux of the film.
Yeah.
The farmer's wife, who, strange enough, her young daughter in the film is played by the girl from Pan's Labyrinth.
Indeed.
So a bit of Spanish horror royalty, child horror royalty there. But, the dialogue from the farm wife who says, when you're here without papers, there are few choices. You belong to anyone who can pay. And it's power and control and the themes of the movie, as well as a really good schlocky Yuzna set piece. And I think that, if you are a fan of Yuzna, if you admire his work, if you are familiar with Society, but equally, if you are as familiar with his more goofy and knockabout stuff, like Faust, you can tell Rottweiler is very, very much a Yuzna film.
So, I mean, I think of all the films that we've talked about so far, since episode 1, I think probably this will be the one that fewest people have seen, would you reckon?
I imagine so. This, like the other Fantastic Factory movies...
Yeah.
This was released on DVD in America via Lionsgate, who of course had gobbled up Trimark. In the UK, it was meant to be picked up by Mosaic, who were releasing a lot of the early Fantastic Factory stuff. They'd released Faust, Arachnid, Beyond Re-Animator. For one reason or another, I think it was just about the time Mosaic were entering administration.
Yeah, I think it was.
Rottweiler. I mean, I can remember going into this DVD store called Silver Screen in Middlesbrough. I was going in there like every week asking, "Where's Rottweiler? Where's Rottweiler? Where's Rottweiler?" And this guy, this chubbyish guy behind the counter, this sort of like a cross between comic book guy and what I imagine Quentin Tarantino was like, as a movie fan.
Yeah.
He was very much always holding court and talking to people about movies, had very strong tastes and stuff. And he when I first went in to ask him about it, he was like, "Oh, Yuzna, the horror guy. Quite kind of dismissive, kind of snooty about it. And but he just got sick of me after about this 6-month stretch of like asking where Rottweiler was. And eventually, I think it ended up coming over here in like 2007, 2008 time, and I can't for the life of me think of a label.
It's a shitty DVD label called DNC, which didn't last long.
Right.
But again, it's a really crappy DVD edition, really. And to be honest, if you saw it unwittingly, you wouldn't, really want to watch it again. And that's a shame, because it needs a little bit more attention. Yeah. So when our loyal listenership rush out to the local CEX and track it down and spend £1 buying it, I mean,
it'll be £1 well spent.
It'll be £1.
And just to add in terms of distribution, both Arachnid and Rottweiler were released theatrically in Spain.
Yeah, I mean, what is it? $250,000 for Rottweiler at the cinema, and Arachnid took over $1 million, didn't it?
Mm.
Which
they
is
did.
Good money.
They did good money in Spain. The critical consensus, they were savage, you know. But again, most of the Fantastic Factory films were. Faust was apparently laughed off the screen when it premiered. Yeah, and then Beyond Re-Animator had suffered the misfortune of just getting dumped straight to Sci-Fi, which I can remember 2003 time. I think it played at Edinburgh's Dead by Dawn festival, something like that. And when Beyond Re-Animator was announced as going straight to Sci-Fi, it was very, very much seen as the death knell of the franchise, which, despite a few attempts by Yuzna, it ultimately has been.
Yeah. So when people press stop on this and they go and rush off to CX and buy a copy, I mean, everyone listening to this would be a Brian Yuzna fan and will have seen, at least half a dozen of his films. So, are there any caveats that you think that they should sit down and bear in mind when they watch this, or should they just head on into it and just absorb it? And
just remember, it's better than Amphibious 3D, which is Yuzna's last directorial film, which is a genuinely bad movie. But of course, that's just me being glib. I think if you're a Yuzna fan, at the risk of repeating myself, you owe it to give Rottweiler either a look if you haven't seen it already, or a second spin, because there is a lot of stuff going on that I think you might have missed first time around. Yeah,
I'd agree with that. Thank you for listening. Please get back in touch with us if you do check out either Rottweiler or Arachnid for the first time, or maybe just a re-evaluation. We'd love to hear your opinion, even if you absolutely despise it. I mean, we can take opinions that don't fall in line with our own. We're not like other people.
Not very well. We will talk about you behind your back.
Yeah, but but yeah, please get in touch. Please keep in touch either via Instagram or Twitter. I'm at @DaveWain.
I am at Matty Budrewicz.
Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time on Natural Selection.
Ta-ta.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to check out the Schlock and Awe page on Instagram, while you're welcome to stalk Matty and Dave on Twitter. See you next time on Natural Selection.